Hello there. Today I'm going to try to shake some cobwebs out of this attic and talk a bit about Gen Con. I've been, for the last several years, seeing stuff on social media where people ask about what they should do at Gen Con. I'm going for the first time. What are the things I need to be aware of? I think a lot of those questions are misplaced, but I'm going to take a little stab here at a long answer that tries to deal with a lot of the issues. I will not be talking about specific events. I think a lot of that has to do with what you're interested in, and I will deal with that more when I talk about events specifically. There are a couple disclaimers. First is that it's 2021. This will be a Gen Con that will be shaped by COVID. It's going to be half the size as normal, which is still a huge convention. Still a lot of events, but not near as many as usual. Certainly, there are no events being done by little independent groups. It's all by the companies or by bigger groups. So that's going to change a little feel for what is available. But still, a lot of stuff going on. But I think we all need to be prepared for it being different. It's going to feel different. It's not going to be like Gen Con's past. If you try too hard to make it like your Gen Con's past, I think you may be in for some disappointment. You need to be ready to go with the flow a little bit. The second disclaimer I'm going to deal with right off the bat is that, let's face it, I'm a heterosexual, male, white, Anglo-Saxon Protestant. There are some issues I just simply cannot address. They do not affect me, and if they are happening within the con, they are often invisible to me. I can tell you that back when I first went to Gen Con in 1983, my wife was one of the very, very few women there. By a decade later, there were a lot of women there, and certainly by the late 90s, it was probably 50-50. It was no longer an issue. When it comes to some of the other groups, the LGBTQ community, I don't know. I really can't say. I have not seen any issues, and I would expect that within the walls of the convention there would not be issues. The few times I've heard of issues too, there's always been someone rapidly getting involved to help people. It's the nature of who we are, I think, as gamers, is that while the psychology of being in a large group is that you can let somebody else deal with it, I think we're all a little bit more aware of things and more likely to jump in and help somebody who needs some help. That said, is once you're outside the walls of the convention, it's like any other city, anywhere else, there's potential for some idiots out there. So you want to take the appropriate precautions. If anybody has any comments specifically about some of these issues, sexism, racism, any of those kind of issues in Gen Con, feel free to leave some comments. Useful comments, please. But it's just simply something, while I would like to be able to address it, I recognize that I am not the person to address it. As to why you might want to listen to my advice, hey, it's unsolicited advice. You can do with it whatever you want. I will say that I went to Gen Con for the first time in 1983. That was the last year in University of Wisconsin Parkside. I've been to every Gen Con since. My experiences at Gen Con have changed over time. Those early years, it was still a big con back then, but you talked about how many thousand people, not how many tens of thousands of people. Early on, I was playing D&D all the time, and then was involved with the RPGA, and then was running RPGA events, and then I was a coordinator for the RPGA. And then I kind of got tired of doing the RPG thing all the time and kind of doing more board game stuff. And I've done a little bit of the card game stuff, and I do remember the year this little card game came out, and by the next year it felt like you couldn't walk around Gen Con without tripping over somebody playing Magic the Gathering. And I mean literally tripping over people playing in the hallways. I've been board game focused. I've had years where I've just spent 4 days in the exhibit hall. And I mean literally the exhibit hall is so big you can spend tremendous amount of time in there and not see everything there is to see. I've had years where I really just concentrated on getting some good photography, and maybe I will put something together with some of my photography later. I will also put some links down below with some specific videos I think might be useful, and I'll reference some of those as I go along here. I've been involved 1 year in the exhibit hall for a large non-gaming company that had a presence there. I have run events independently. I'm just taking a quick look at my list here. Yeah, that covers a lot. You see, I've done a lot of things, and there's a ton of things I haven't done. So my advice is not going to be about do this or do that in terms of specific events. My advice is going to be aimed more at the things you need to be aware of, or the things you need to watch out for to have probably the best Gen Con you can have. Okay, the first topic we're going to address is, all the social media posts I see where someone says, I'm going for the first time, what is it I need to do? Or in other words, what are you afraid of missing? Let's be honest, one of the advantages of a convention like Gen Con is it's so big, there are so many people there that there are events that can appeal to really niche markets and still sell out. What do you need to do while you're there? What do you want to do? Do you want to do RPGs? Do you want to do board games? Do you want to do card games? There's films being shown. There's entertainment in the hallways. There's the exhibit hall. There's the art show. There's the booksellers lane. You name it, something's going on. The costumes, the cosplay stuff with the costume parade. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, if you look at my own history, you'll see that I've every few years changed kind of what the focus is of what I do at Gen Con. I've done the board game thing. Now I'm going to do the RPG thing, or now I'm going to take photography this year and just take a lot of pictures and look at a lot of stuff. And I'll be honest, quite often some of the neatest things that I've tripped across have been things that I've just literally tripped across. Some group in the hallway performing something, or even people who were not even officially there to performing something in the hallway. You need to be open for those events as well. Just be ready for that. You want your full enjoyment of Gen Con? You need to decide what it is you want to do, and then you need to be open for the things that come along that you didn't even expect. So the second issue I'm going to address is just the sheer size of the space. Gen Con is huge. The Indianapolis Convention Center is, 3-4 blocks long and 2-3 blocks wide. Then if you add the hotel events, you've now pushed yourself out another block or two in every direction. In 2021, we won't have stuff going on in the Cult Stadium, but in other years we have, and so there's another block to get down to the stadium, and then the stadium itself covers a several block area. If you literally try to schedule yourself every minute, you may find yourself not able to get from one place to another in time. You just need to be aware of the size of the space. And if you have some physical limitations, it's especially important to be aware of the size of the space. And be certain you understand where the events you're doing are. We'll talk about this some in housing as well, this applies to that as well, where you want to stay. Just be aware. I'm going to put a link down below. I did a video a few years ago where I just walked around the outside of the convention center, back through some of the space, and finally through the exhibit hall. It's a long video, but it'll give you an idea of just the size of the convention center, like I said. And then you add the hotels and potentially the Cult Stadium, and now you've pushed out many blocks in each direction. So you just need to be aware there's a lot of ground that you may need to cover to get from one event to another. Okay, so let's talk about events a little bit. So, like I said before, there are thousands of events going on, and it can be really hard to figure out which ones you want. I don't have any really good advice for that. I like the fact that I can pull down a spreadsheet and filter that down a lot of different ways. Personally, I'm always looking for something that I didn't even know I was looking for, so it's nice to be able just to kind of scan through what's there and see what catches my eye. But if you're looking for something specific, the web front end should probably be perfectly adequate for what you're doing. But be aware that you can pull down that spreadsheet. The other thing you have to be aware of is typically the most popular events could literally sell out within minutes of the events becoming open. This year, it's 2021, it's a little different this year especially, but I think there were 3 things I tried to get right away. I literally put in my wish list within seconds of the event thing going up, and I got none of them. Don't worry, I'm doing other stuff. There's always something to do. Like I said, I'm always looking for something new and different to do. Also be aware, though, that just about every event's going to have a certain number of no-shows. People who either just maybe for whatever reason didn't make it to the con, maybe they're not well, or they found they were 6 blocks away and weren't going to be able to get there in time, and so they just didn't show up. So if you really want to do something and you're willing to spend the time, show up. Make certain the organizers of the event are aware that you want to play. And nowadays, especially with electronic ticketing, it's real easy to add people in once they know how many no-shows they have. They're going to wait 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it is the guidelines say, before they'll sell you a ticket. But the truth is, like I said, there's almost always some no-shows. So if there's something you really want to do, show up and try it. Try to get in. As far as other things, like I said, me, it's about looking for things I haven't done before, looking around and trying doing different stuff. But it could be different for you. So I'm just not going to make recommendations specifically about the events so much as saying, how do you want to go looking for events? Okay, let's talk about the exhibit hall. I mean, this is 2021. It's going to be a little different this year. The aisles are going to be a little wider, so hopefully there won't be as many traffic jams. But still, it's a big place. There'll be lots of people. They're trying to arrange things this year so there won't be the wall of people coming in right as it opens. Hopefully people pay attention to that, and you don't have, wall-to-wall people for a city block long for, 40 feet back the width of that hallway, shoulder to shoulder, waiting to get into the exhibit hall. That's just not a good thing this year, but it gives you an idea. It's going to be a lot of people going in the exhibit hall, and if you want an idea how big the exhibit hall is, remember I said the convention center is like 3-4 blocks long, 2-3 blocks in depth. Well, the exhibit hall is probably about a third of that. Back in 2011, I shot a video. I'll put a link down below to that video, where I just started in one corner, walked down the length of the exhibit hall, and then up the width. And that took almost 7 minutes. And that vendor hall was probably at most 2/3 the size of the current vendor hall, or the exhibit hall. So be aware it's a big space. I used to be able to do the vendor hall every day if I wanted to do that. I've done cons like that, where I just do the vendor hall every day and do demos and do whatever. But it's hit the point where it's getting hard to do the whole vendor hall in just one day. I will tell you, it's worth going back to the vendor hall. You will see things the next day that you didn't see the day before, and it's not going to be because it wasn't there. It's just going to be because your attention was drawn different ways at different times by different things. So that can be a fun thing just to do right there, is to go through the vendor hall itself and see what's there, what's new, what are the things you never heard of. And in many cases, it's a chance for you to actually talk to guys who have developed some of these games you want to play, or some of the industry people at the booths in a little more informal way than maybe when they do seminars or whatever. It's just a good place to be in that regard. I do kind of miss the days back in Milwaukee when it was all a bit smaller and it felt more like it was all the companies that were there. Today there are more and more, the card companies and the hobby shops and the whatever that are not specific to a company. So that's less about talking to the industry people, but they do bring a bigger variety of things that you can do and see. So it's good in that way. Okay, let's talk about something I don't usually seem talked about, at least not on social media when people are asking about what do I need to do at Gen Con. And I'm going to say it's real simple. Take care of yourself. You may think you can go 4 days without sleep. I run events Sunday morning. People cannot go 4 days without sleep. They are zombies Sunday morning if they do. They think they're there, but they're not. So first of all, plan at least a minimum amount of sleep. 2, watch what you eat. I mean, part of the fun of being away is eating whatever stuff and having fun and doing all that. And that's great. But if you eat nothing but crap for 4 days, you're going to feel like crap on the 4th day. So take care of yourself. Get some sleep. Eat properly. Have something to drink. And by drink, I'm not talking about, 48 ounces of pop. I'm talking about get some water in you, get whatever. Stay hydrated. Admittedly, this year will be in September. It may not be as hot outside. Usually it's in August. But plan to stay hydrated. If you get dehydrated, you're going to feel bad at the end of 4 days as well. And part of taking care of yourself is just, it will help you stay healthy. You're going to be in a space, even without COVID, you're going to be in a space with 30,000 to 60,000 other people, depending upon the year. Some of them are going to be carrying something. There's a reason some of us who go to cons a lot talk about con crud. You almost always feel a little dragged out afterwards, and it's almost probably some cold or some bug that you've picked up from somebody else there. If you take care of yourself, you're more likely to weather that well. Just take care of yourself. And the final one is, please take a shower once in a while. I shouldn't have to say more than that. All of us who've gone to cons a lot have run into those people. Next on my list is lodging. There are lots of lodging options, ranging from the hotels right across the street to hotels out by the airport or other distant locations to renting a house. Um, this year, there are still hotel rooms available, across the street. In effect, normally in normal Gen Cons, those hotel rooms are all gone within a day or two of housing becoming open. Although occasionally I've heard of people getting really nice rooms, across the street at the last minute because of cancellations or so on that have opened up some rooms. That's got a real nice option because you've always got the option just to walk across the street if you need a break, if you need to take a nap, if you've bought some stuff and you need to drop it off somewhere. It's really nice to be able just to walk across. On the other hand, those are the hotels that also have events going on them in general. There's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of activity, and if you do have a vehicle with you, the parking there is not necessarily cheap, although there are other parking options. The hotels out, let's say by the airport, or some of the other hotels that are out that are part of the housing block are less expensive. You're either going to drive back and forth or take the shuttle buses back and forth, and there are shuttle buses for most of them. They're perfectly adequate, perfectly good. If you drive back and forth, now you've still got the parking expense. And then finally, what I've been doing the last several years is I get together with some other people and we rent a house. And for someone like me who really needs to get away from all the noise and stuff once in a while, it is really useful for me to be able to go back to a house that's away and I can relax and do my thing, and I don't have people running up and down the hallways or any of that kind of stuff going on to disturb me. But again, you got to drive back and forth. You've got to organize between several people if you want to be certain, people have different events and stuff going on, to be certain that people get moved back and forth. You've got the parking expense. There are several parking lots that are available right in and around the convention center. They're not inexpensive, but they are there. I used to park down by the stadium a lot. Now the last couple of years I've made use of the gate 10 parking stuff, which you can talk to them, and they have spaces south of the stadium, so that's a pretty distant walk, but they've got a shuttle bus that runs back and forth if you don't want to do those walks. And that's also an option if you're staying at the hotels, is getting one a gate 10 parking thing, and you can use the shuttles to get around again to get back and forth. So lodging, lots of options. The question is how close do you want to be to what's going on? How much do you want to be able to get away? And I mean get away. Those are all things you have to juggle with what you can afford also. Okay, I mentioned food earlier in terms of taking care of yourself, but let's talk about what kind of food's available. I mean, within the convention center itself, you have convention center food. It ranges from okay to adequate. It's going to be overpriced, but you can get a slice of pizza, you can get some chicken fingers, you can get a burger, you can get a hot dog. I think there's the one place that has some salads. I mean, there are some options. All convenient. They're right there in the convention center. How good it is for you, that's another question if you're eating like that all the time, but it's there. Parked right outside, you've got the food trucks nowadays, and most years you have a few trucks down by the stadium as well. That brings in a nice variety of different kinds of food. Again, how good is it for you depends upon the truck and what you're getting from, but everything from sandwiches to barbecue to pizzas to Asian, you name it, it's probably out there in the food trucks. If you're interested in the food trucks, there's usually a list available somewhere that tells you which food trucks are going to be there, which days, which times. So if you have specific ones you want to look for, specific food you want, you know when to go for those. It does bring a nice option close to the convention center. And then, of course, within 2, 3, 4 blocks, I mean, we're in downtown Indianapolis. You'd have all the kinds of restaurants and food options you'd expect in a downtown area, from a Subway or McDonald's to you got the Ram Brewery that is part of, always has something going on with the convention, to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. You have all these kind of places. So there's a huge variety of food within several blocks of the convention center. And that can be a great way to at least eat a little better. I believe the convention center doesn't like you bringing your own food in. Truthfully, as long as you're circumspect about it, they probably won't notice. I mean, I've never brought meals in, but I've often carried my own granola bars and stuff in. So take care of yourself. eat appropriately, there's a lot of options nearby. My final topic is, well, a little hard for me to get my hands on it myself. It's about etiquette in general. So let's talk about some things. If you're signed up for an event, you should show up for the event. You're slowing things down when you don't show up, even if they do have somebody else there to get the ticket. They have to wait a certain amount of time to make certain you're not going to show up. Obviously, things happen. We all understand that. That's a simple one. Be polite. You're going to be in fairly crowded circumstances. Be aware of what's going on around you. We're all going to bump into each other on occasion on accident, but be aware and try to deal with that. Be ready to go with the flow when things are not going the way you expect. There's just, again, it's a big thing going on. It's amazing how well it goes on, but there's always going to be some rough edges. And in 2021, as I said earlier, it's going to be different. And in a lot of ways, we can't predict how it's going to be different. So you just need to be a little bit prepared for that. When it comes to things like the cosplayers, all the usual cosplay kind of etiquette applies. If they're not, especially, if they're not in the area that's set aside for that, you really need to ask them before you take a picture. Or you do what I do and I just sit, a mile away with a telephoto lens and get pictures. But that's probably not the best etiquette either. Like I said, most of the etiquette is just, when you're at the table, be at the table. Pay attention to the game, not your phone. It's just all the things you'd usually expect. When we've got that many people in one space, we all have to work a little bit harder at making certain that we don't step on each other's toes. I'm finding it a little hard to wrap up. There's lots of little things and little stories I kind of wanted to share that I never got to, and they don't really fit well with what I've done so far. So, hey, maybe I'll save that for some other video later on. If you have some questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I may or may not answer them depending upon the nature of the comment, but I think we all together can do better than just me giving ideas. And I would love to see what people have to say, especially on some of the topics, as I said earlier, that I can't really cover well. It's real simple, in my opinion, having a good convention. Pick a few things you want to do, schedule those, and then be open for the things you trip across that you just weren't even aware were there, and you'll have a good time. A wise man also once told me that when the dam breaks, you go with the flow. GenCon's a big thing. There's always a few rough edges. There's always going to be a couple things that just don't go quite as planned. You got to be prepared to go with those. This is 2021. I think that's going to be more than usual, and we're all going to need to be prepared to go with the flow. Getting all hot and bothered about things that aren't quite the way we imagined they were going to be is just not going to change them. So instead, we need to find our joy in our games, like we always do. Again, any comments, any ideas, leave them down below. I'm going to put some links in the description to some videos and stuff I've shot in the past to give you an idea of some things that you might want to look for, or just things I've stumbled across in the past. And I hope to see some of you at Gen Con. If you see me, feel free to say hi. And otherwise, have a good one.